Hey guys.
Hey everybody.
Welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor weekly video. Tonight we're going to be talking about using travel therapy to relocate to a new area that you want to move to permanently. We've had a lot of people reach out to us lately asking that question, is that feasible? Because I think a lot of people right now, with everything being so crazy in the world, losing jobs and things, I think some people are using this opportunity to move to new locations or new settings, and they're thinking, okay, if I'm going to move to a new area, why not just give travel therapy a shot in that area to see how I like it? So that seems very plausible. So we want to talk about that and some of the limitations with this. So Whitney's going to introduce us. I'm going to get this video shared in a few different groups, and then we'll talk about the topic.
All right, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Whitney Aiken.
And I'm Jared Kazaza.
And we are both traveling doctors of physical therapy. We run the website and the social media page Travel Therapy Mentor, and every week we try to bring you a video on a different topic related to travel therapy. So many of you guys may have tuned in for our videos in the past, and thank you for joining us again. If tonight is your first time joining us, we encourage you to go back and watch some of our old videos. Over the past year and a half or so, we've done videos on just about any topic you could think of related to travel therapy. So as Jared said, this is a topic that we wanted to cover because we definitely have a lot of people reach out to us in the past, but especially now, that are thinking about using travel therapy as a means to work in a location maybe where they already live, or a location that they were interested in trying out. It's especially true for people that, like, say they already know they want to go live in an area, like their spouse is going to be in an area and relocating there, and they say, well, let me try out a temporary job for a little while. And then it's also true of some more popular places. So like a lot of people say, like, wow, I'd love to see what it's like to live in Austin, Texas, or San Diego, California, or somewhere like that. So a lot of people think, well, I'll go and I'll try that out before I would move there permanently. So it's definitely a good idea. It's a good thought, but there are some limitations, and especially right now, it's particularly difficult. So we want to talk about some of the challenges, some of the things that you need to consider if this is the route you're trying to go, and then offer you some suggestions on how you might better be able to use travel therapy in this manner. So if you are joining on with us live, we'd love if you'd say hello. So you can just type in the comments, let us know you're watching. Let us know if you are a travel therapist or you're someone who's thinking about travel therapy. We love to hear from you. And we will take some comments and questions towards the end of the video as well. So ask us any questions that you have. So Jared is again just sharing our video in a couple of groups so that more people can join on with us live. And I know that a lot of you guys tune in later, not during the live broadcast, that some of you guys will watch later. So if you are watching on the replay, just leave us a comment and say, team replay or whatever you want to say to let us know you watched. So I see George is on. Hey George. Hi Sandy. Hey everybody. Okay, so Jared's got us live, and we will just dive into talking about relocating using travel therapy.
Yeah, so I think, like I said in the beginning, I think this is very common now because people want to kind of change their whole, people are more interested in changing up their whole life right now, since there's been major changes already, and why not use this opportunity to move to a new area and try out living in a new area. Travel therapy seems perfect for that because, okay, if I want to move to a new area, why not try out that area first? Or if I want to move to that area, why not try out a few clinics in the area to find which one I like before I commit to something? There are some issues with that though. One being that it's very, depending on the city, because everyone's needs are different, very difficult to find jobs in many cities. And that's even when the job market's good. And right now the job market is not very good. And so usually these cities that people want to try out to move to are places like Denver, San Diego, Austin, Texas, Seattle, the places that are very high demand. And there are very few travel jobs in those areas usually.
Yeah. So like I said, I think the two big camps that we have here is like the person who they say, I would really be interested in living in this new place, but I still have my house back home. But maybe I'll go and I'll leave for 3 months or 6 months and I'll just go check it out before I decide to commit to move there. So there's the people who are gonna maybe just scope it out before they commit to move there. Now there's other people that will already have moved there, like they maybe already moved there with their significant other, or they already have a house there, and they're just kind of job shopping around. And those kind of pose some different challenges. So like Jared said, the first one is that it's not always possible just to say, go to a travel therapy recruiter and say, I want a job in Austin, Texas. because they're going to kind of laugh at you and say, yeah, so does everybody.
Yeah.
It's not so easy just to be really particular about the city and state in which you want to go to. And it's certainly not easy to be particular about the city, state, and the setting that you want to go to.
Yep.
So it's just not as easy as I think a lot of people think. You can't always, even when the job market was good last year, it was not really easy just to be very specific, especially if it was a popular place. A lot of times travel therapy jobs might be a little in the outskirts or in the middle of nowhere, or places that are less popular.
And it's difficult even if you desire to go to a rural area, because then there's just less jobs in that area, like clinics in particular. So the chances of there being one of those clinics having an opening is pretty low. So obviously the popular places are hard because there's high demand, but even rural places are hard because there's less opportunity.
Yeah, it's just kind of like you can't really time the job market. So, if you talk to a recruiter or you talk to somebody, sure, there are jobs, most places in the state at some point, but maybe not this year, maybe not this month, maybe not next month. Just because you want to start a job in July in this certain place doesn't mean there is going to be a need for a travel therapist in July in that place. A lot of people might be looking to hire a permanent therapist, but not necessarily a travel therapist. So it's just really hard to time the market, and I think it makes it very challenging when you have a very particular place in mind.
Yeah.
Especially right now with how bad the job market is.
There were situations in the past where people reached out to us, maybe 2 years ago, the job market was much better, and they might be like, hey, I'm thinking about moving to Richmond, Virginia, or the coast of Virginia, or the coast of North Carolina, and you might be able to find at that time maybe consistent work in that area, maybe 1 or 2 jobs back to back in different clinics in that area to try it out. Maybe not within the exact city you want, but probably in like a 30 or 40 mile radius. But right now that is much, much harder.
Yeah. So, one, it's hard just to get a job. It's definitely hard to get multiple jobs. So say that you were the person who was going to move to like the Seattle region or something like that, and you already had a house there and we're going to be living there for whatever reason. And then you say, well, I just want a job shop. I want to maybe try out a couple of different contracts in that area to see where I would like to work and maybe go permanent after that. Well, it's really hard just to find one job, but it's definitely hard to line up multiple back-to-back opportunities like that. It is possible. There are people that do more of like a local travel in that regard, but it's just challenging. It's not as easy as you would think to come by those temporary jobs.
For sure.
So the next part about this particular situation that we have to think about is not only the scarcity of jobs, but the logistics of how we get paid as travelers and the tax home rules.
Yeah, so an important part about being a traveler to make more money is you need a tax home. So people usually, when they're talking about moving to a new location, it's not just so simple as, okay, I'll pack up all my stuff, I'll move to a central location in the city, and I'll take travel jobs. That's what people think would happen. But it doesn't work that way. One, because like we talked about, it can be hard to find jobs in that city or close by. But in addition, you need to duplicate expenses in order to have a tax home, which would mean that you need to basically be leaving stuff back home at your original location, paying for rent there, and paying for utilities, all that stuff, have all your mail and things registered at that tax home, and then be renting a place in the new location. That's the only way to get tax-free stipends. Otherwise, the pay is much lower. It's more in line with like a full-time PRN work than it is for an actual travel contract where you make a lot more money.
Yep. So this might work for people that, again, they just want to go and try out a place for a little while. They're still going to keep their house or their apartment or their place back home, and they're still going to leave the majority of their stuff there, but then they're just going to set out on a trip for 3 to 6 months to try out a new place. In that case, you're okay because you're still keeping your place back home and you're renting a place just temporarily at the new location just to shop around and see if you like it. In that case, you're A-okay because then you're like a standard traveler, where you still maintain your home and you go try out this new place. However, if you're the person who is already moving there, you're like, I am moving to Seattle. I will be living in Seattle now. This is my house. Me and my significant other live here now, and I'm going to be a travel therapist around Seattle for a little while. You are not able to take those jobs with the tax-free stipends because you don't have another home. Now Seattle is your new home. And when we spoke with Joseph Smith at Travel Tax, a really good example of this is like a military family. This would also apply if you were just relocating for whatever reason, but it happens pretty commonly with military families where the spouse is going to be there for a while, and so then the person who's the therapist or the nurse wants to kind of just do some temporary jobs while they're going to be stationed there for a while. Well, the fact that you have a contract, like a long-term duty station there with the military, it shows what he called intent to live there, intent to be a resident there for several years. So that's basically, in the eyes of the government, your new home.
Yep.
It's a little more complicated than that when it comes to the military stuff, but we do know that based on what we heard from Joseph Smith, that if your spouse or significant other is supposed to be there for a while on their assignment, that you can't receive the tax-free stipends as the significant other, because you're basically saying that you're going to be there for the next couple years.
Yeah, and that seems like we have a lot of people reach out about that, because that seems like a perfect thing to do. So if you have a spouse that's in the military going to a new city, why take a permanent job there if you could take travel contracts making more money? So that's what people think, is like, okay, I'll just take a travel contract and, you know, maybe commute 20 miles or 30 miles. And even if you can find jobs, you still won't get the tax-free stipend. So it's not like a real travel contract unless you're maintaining a tax home and going to the new location.
Yeah, and like I said, same thing for civilian work. Say that you and your significant other are just moving there, you bought a house, you have a 1 or 2 year lease on an apartment, whatever it might be. That's your new home. You're not keeping a home back where you moved from, so you cannot actually take these tax-free stipends the way that a normal traveler would. You could still take a job. You could still take like a temporary short contract, but you would just have all your money taxed. So it would be different than like being a regular traveler.
Yep. Hey, John. Hey, Nick.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining. Again, if anybody's watching, if you want to leave us a comment, if you want to say hi, let us know. If you
have any questions, let us know.
If you're a traveler, if you're somebody who's thinking about traveling, let us know what your situation is. And also, if you could just give this video a thumbs up if you're getting any valuable information out of it.
So if you do want to do this, the job market will pick up in the next few months, hopefully, because it's been a pretty rough last 3 months for all travelers right now. But if you do want to do this, you really need to be not very picky about the setting you work in. So if, say you want to be specifically around San Antonio, you have to be open to almost every setting around there in order to have any chance of finding a job within driving distance of San Antonio. You also probably should, if you do find a contract, try to extend that contract longer. If you want to stay there more than 3 months or whatever, because finding back-to-back contracts in that same area, even back-to-back in terms of taking 2 weeks off and finding another one, is going to be very hard.
Mm-hmm. So it's possible. Like when the job market was better, it's certainly possible. We had a few people comment on our post earlier and said that they've done this in the past. One of which was an SLP. So the SLP job market is still fairly good right now. So you actually have an opportunity right now, if you're an SLP, to be a little more picky. Like you might see some jobs in some of these popular areas that you would want to go anyway. And when the PT and OT market were a little bit better, you might have gotten lucky and been like, oh wow, like perfect. It's exactly where I wanted to be and it's the setting I wanted. So sometimes you can get lucky, but a lot of times you're gonna have to be a little more flexible on the setting, the start date, and then you might also need to consider looking into just a general region. So maybe it's not in that setting or in that city, right in the city, but maybe it's in the suburbs of that city or somewhere within an hour, because then you could still kind of get a feel for that general area, get a feel for living in that new state. You could still drive into the desired location on the weekends and still kind of, try it out in that regard, but you just might not be exactly in the city.
Yep. Another thing that's vital is to work with more than one company looking for jobs, because as we've mentioned in the past, if you guys have watched our videos, each company will have majority of the same jobs, but some different jobs. Sometimes they have exclusive contracts. So if you're not working with 2 or more companies, you might miss out on 1 or 2 jobs in that area. And if you're looking for a very specific city, then you need as many options as possible to try to find something close by. And so normally probably a smart thing to do is work with at least 2, but probably more than that, different companies. And in addition to that, one big company, because they have the most jobs. There's a few pretty big companies that have the majority of the jobs. And then in addition, maybe you try a small company that will be more willing to make cold calls for you and try to find contracts that they could just place you in. Because sometimes what happens is a job won't actually be open, so there's no listing for it, but a recruiter might call a facility, say that they have a listing for a permanent position. they might be able to call the facility and say, hey, I see you have this listing. I have a traveler that wants to come there that would take this job if you're willing to set up a contract with us for 3 months. And sometimes those facilities are willing to do that depending on how desperate they are to get somebody in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of different strategies when it comes to recruiting. So it's really important that if you're looking for something very specific, like in a certain city, like Jared said, work with a couple different companies and different sizes of companies. Like work with some of the bigger ones that are gonna cast a wide net, have a lot of job options all across the country, and hopefully have some job options in the city where you're looking. But also, like he said, some of these smaller companies, they just have more time, they're more willing to call around. Some of the big companies and some of the recruiters will tell you, like, they don't just spend their time calling around trying to dig up work, but some of the smaller companies will. And then also some of the companies, what they'll do is they'll kind of try to look back at jobs that they've had in the past. So maybe they don't see a job open in, let's say, Denver at the time, but maybe they're like, well, I know we have a contract with a hospital there or a clinic there that we've had travelers at in the past. Maybe we could get our account reps to call them back and say, hey, I know you don't have a listing right now, but could you use a traveler right now? Or could you use a traveler here in a couple weeks? Sometimes they know, like internally within a company, they might know what their staffing needs are going to be in a little while, but they just don't have a job advertised yet. So it's really important to just kind of have a variety of recruiters and ask them if they can utilize some of those strategies like cold calls or calling some facilities where they had travelers before, or sometimes they'll do what's called a backfill where they might be like, oh, I have a traveler on contract there now. So I know that, in 3 weeks their contract ends. So maybe we could try to see if they could use you. So there's different strategies there.
Yeah, that's really an ideal situation, because if they have a traveler there, they know the traveler's not going to extend, they know the facility's still going to need someone, then that's perfect. They can get you in that contract before it ever opens. So that is a great situation. Yeah. Another thing that you can do is if you have a very specific city you need to be in, hey Sean, thanks for joining, is you can call these facilities yourself. So kind of like I was saying with a recruiter that will do cold calls to different facilities to see if they'll take a traveler, you can do that yourself as the traveler and say, look on Indeed or one of those job websites, just Google physical therapy jobs or occupational therapy jobs in blank city, and call those places that have open and permanent positions and say, would you consider taking a traveler? I'm planning to move to that area. I want to try some different clinics out as a traveler and sign a contract that way.
Yeah, that's what I would really do if I was looking for a job in a very specific area. Kind of market yourself. I mean, it is great to have a recruiter, but nobody's going to look out for you the way that you're going to look out for yourself. And if you really need a job in that area, pursue all avenues. So look at permanent job listings, but maybe even call around to some facilities if you're like, wow, I see there's an outpatient clinic like right near where we just bought this house. Why don't I just call them and say, hey, I know I'll be moving to the area. I was wondering if you might need some help. I'm looking for maybe a short-term contract, and you could even say, sometimes there's an option called temp to perm. So say, would you all be interested in something like a temp to perm option where I start as a temporary employee, we see how it goes together, if it's a good fit for me, and I could potentially come on as a permanent employee. So that's one way to market yourself.
Yeah, I think that is, and as a benefit to doing that, if you call and you find a contract or find a facility that would be interested in offering you a contract, a lot of times you can take that job to a travel company and get a finder's fee for that. And every company has different rules about that. Some don't do it at all. Some will offer $500 or $1,000 as a finder's fee for bringing them a new client. You can take the job independently as an independent contractor traveler, but it's just more involved. You have to come up with your own contract. You have to figure out how taxes will work as a 1099 employee, those kind of things. So in our experience, when we've done that in the past, we found jobs before, taking it to a recruiter. The recruiter contacts the facility, they set everything up for us, and then we just take the job through them. Yeah.
So, if you were to move into this situation and try to market yourself in that way, you just need to work on your wording. Maybe it's something like, I'm going to be moving to the area and I want to try out a couple different settings. Previously I've worked in this setting, and this will be a different setting for me, something like that. Or if you're a student who's just graduated, and you might say, well, I'm interested in seeing what type of position fits the best for me since I'm just beginning my career. Or if you're the type of person who hasn't moved there yet, then you could say, okay, right now I live here and I'm thinking about relocating there, but I want to take a contract job, a travel job first, just to decide if that's the city I want to move to. But you have to be, crafty with your wording because otherwise they're gonna be like, why don't you want to just be a permanent employee? Why don't you just want to take a regular job?
Yep.
So definitely think about how you're gonna market yourself in that regard.
Yeah, that's very important. Marketing yourself, calling these places, giving them your a spiel about how your experience, your benefits, things that will help them, and why it would be a good idea for them to hire you temporarily. Like, a lot of it comes down to you being able to market yourself.
Yeah. So that's most of what we wanted to cover on this topic. If anybody is watching live or if you're watching later on the replay, we'd love to know if you have questions about this. If you want to tell us about your particular situation, if this is something you're thinking about doing. We'd also love to hear some stories from folks that have done this in the past, if they've been able to successfully do a temp to perm type thing, or scope out an area before becoming a permanent resident of that area. It's definitely possible, but I think our overall message today is just that right now in the current job market and the current environment, it's a lot of people have reached out to us and they said, well, there's not a lot of jobs in my area, so I was thinking about taking a travel job. Maybe there would be more jobs somewhere else. But we have to understand that this crisis is going on nationwide. I mean, obviously it's going on worldwide, but it's definitely happening nationwide. So jobs are down everywhere. They're not just down in your area. They're down across the whole country.
Yeah, and the travel market is really reflective of the broader therapy market in general for jobs. And usually it kind of lags behind because a lot of times people will take a permanent person before they try to get a traveler. So usually if the job market is difficult in your area or in the surrounding areas, it's probably going to be difficult to find a travel job as well. And that has definitely been the case. So right now, a lot of people are displaced and they think that, okay, there's no jobs in my area, maybe there will be somewhere else in the country. And it's hard to find jobs anywhere in the country right now. You can definitely do it, but it is more difficult than it has been ever in our experience.
Yeah, so I think right now, regardless of where you're looking for a job, whether you're looking for a new job within your own area that you already live, if you're looking to relocate to somewhere else, I think using some of these strategies we talked about are going to be important for anyone and everyone job searching right now. Whether you're looking for more of a permanent job, a PRN job, or a temporary job, trying to market yourself if you can, either yourself or having your recruiter cold call places, I think is important, because I think there's going to be a lot of facilities out there right now that are hesitant to put out job listings. They're going to maybe just try to rely on the staff they have, or like PRN staff. They're going to be hesitant to advertise for a new therapist, a new full-time therapist, because they don't know what their caseload is going to be like in these uncertain times. But perhaps, like I said, if you market yourself and you say that you're flexible and you're willing to, work with them on some things like the hours and the pay, then maybe they'll say, okay, you know what, maybe we could bring somebody on kind of temporary for now and just see how it goes.
Yep. So hopefully that gives you guys some insight. Difficult thing to do right now. There has been times in the past, and depending on what city you want to go to, that it does work. And hopefully that will be the case in the future, but you definitely have to be flexible. You have to work with multiple companies. If you guys need recommendations, feel free to reach out to us on the website, traveltherapymentor.com. We have a recruiter recommendation tab at the top, and it'll just ask you some questions about your situation so that we can match you with some recruiters that we think will work well for you.
Yeah, we'd be happy to help in that regard. And again, it's always a good idea to work with a few different recruiters to have the most job options. And I will say, as we mentioned earlier, this advice is mainly for PT, OT, and assistants right now. The SLP market is still pretty strong. It's not as strong as it has been in the past, but you can be a little more picky as an SLP right now. But unfortunately for us as PTs, OTs, PTAs, and CODAs, it's not really a time that we can be picky right now, just because jobs are so slim nationwide.
Yep.
So it's a time that we all need to be a little more flexible, be willing to maybe go outside of our comfort zone, work in some settings that we normally wouldn't necessarily work in, take less hours, because I think a lot of places are not going to be guaranteeing 40 hours. Perhaps take a little bit of a pay cut if necessary just to get started working, because the job market is rough right now.
Yep. So thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions, if you're listening to this later or watching the video later, feel free to ask us, drop it in the comments below, or you can send us a message, and we will be back with you next week.
All right. Have a great night, guys. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.